Welcome to Season 1 of the Resilient Dad Show. I'm your host, Pat DiDomenico. When I became a single dad and was faced with navigating social parenting issues and the complexity of the family legal system, I felt confused and I felt like I had nowhere to turn. That's why I created the Resilient Dad Show, a place that I so badly needed and wish had been available for me during the grueling and challenging times of working through my own experience. This show will feature industry experts in mental health, social services, and personal development, along with resilient dad role models whose stories of overcoming the challenges of co-parenting will create a new vision for the life you and your kids deserve. If you have any questions or want to suggest a future guest on the show, please visit resilientdad.fm for more information. Hi guys, and welcome back to the Resilient Dad Show. I'm your host, Pat DiDomenico, and on today's episode, we have a special guest, Chris Decker. Chris, welcome to the show.
Hey, what's going on, Pat? I'm really honored that you are having me on today for an interview to talk about this topic of fatherhood.
Well, it's a privilege of mine, and and an honor, and I appreciate your time and your openness to talk about in terms of your own experience and becoming a dad yourself. So let's just start by in terms of, with some of your own experiences as a child and in terms of how your perception or in terms of what a dad should be and your role models as a child.
Well, I'll talk a little bit about today and what that looks like today. I just read a book called Intuitive Parenting, How to Be an Intuitive Parent. And this was really interesting, is that it painted this example of if my kid is fighting me, my son is fighting me in the morning about not wanting to get out of his pajamas. He has these, he has these really cool pajamas with different monster characters on him, and he doesn't like taking them off sometimes and changing into his real clothes. And he has a pair of shoes that look like sharks. So he's got his shark shoes, and he's just got this eclectic personality. Sometimes he wants to wear rain boots. And I could spend 30 minutes, 45 minutes fighting with him about wearing his rain boots. Or I can say, wait a second, why am I not okay with letting him wear his rain boots to go to childcare today? Because that's my own crap that I'm bringing to it. I'm afraid of how the childcare people are going to perceive me as a father for letting my kid wear the rain boots. But why? Yeah. What exactly kind of great judgment are these childcare professionals going to bring upon me as a father if my son wants to wear colorful clothing and rain boots? Intuitive parenting says, don't fight it. Let him be self-expressive, why am I trying to fight all these things? If he wants to eat mac and cheese, why am I trying to force him to eat Brussels sprouts right now? It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, that it reminds me of that movie with Adam Sandler, and he becomes a dad accidentally. Do you remember I can't remember was it Big Daddy?
Yeah, it was Big Daddy.
Yeah.
There was a lot of literal examples in that movie, I think, of intuitive parenting, but maybe taken to a far extreme with candy and stuff.
But yeah, the perception on what we think in terms of is acceptable can be very influenced by the external world, and what if he wants to wear his monster pajamas and his shark shoes, why not? Let him stand out.
Here's another example, right? And this is another example from the book is, all right, so maybe we've had a long day and I've got to get some grocery shopping done. This happens at Target all the time, and I've got to go get some stuff. I'm not sure. Do they have Target in Australia?
Yes, we do. We do.
So over here in the States, we have a place called Target, right?
Yeah.
And so I'll put him in the cart, and we'll start pushing, and he'll grasp for different toys, And then I'll be in the middle of the aisle, like getting some groceries or whatever, and he'll just start screaming. He'll just start screaming. I'm like, what the fuck is wrong with you? Why are you screaming? This makes no sense. You're in danger. But it's because I had forced him into too many situations that I had wanted him to do. He'd been going around town with me on errands for several hours. He was tired. He didn't want to be in a shopping cart, strapped with no toys, having to go through and buy all these boring groceries. No, he wants to run around. He wants to be at the park. He wants to ride his scooter. And here I am. I forced him into this situation. Instead of saying, oh, my kid is misbehaving, maybe I missed the clues as a father that he's too tired to go shopping with me right now. And maybe I should go home and go shopping tomorrow. You know what I'm saying?
That's, that's a great awareness piece. And, do you really need to go shopping right at that second? Is it really that important, or would it, in terms of having that opportunity to do some things that your son wants to do? But then
is it his fault for behaving that way? No, it's my fault because I put him in this situation.
Absolutely. And then we get frustrated for, why is he screaming? Why is he playing up? He's being ungrateful, in terms of we just went to McDonald's, or, he already has a billion toys at home. That's a great piece. And I'll definitely remind myself when my son decides to play up again. And I guess he's just expressing himself. He just needs to let things out, just like we do. Bottling things up doesn't really help anyone, so that's his outlet. You've made me do errands for a couple of hours, so I'm just gonna scream.
But this is like, okay, now I'm the kind of father that, I'm watching documentaries with my wife about like what is good parenting, or I'm going to a marriage seminar, or I'm even listening to this kind of book in the first place. I definitely was not exposed to anything like that. So right now I'm basically learning how to be a father from scratch. I didn't actually have any positive role models in terms of fatherhood. So I'm kind of like scrambling to put the pieces together, while I'm working on myself, while trying to learn how to be a good dad, because sometimes things will come up and then I'm triggered back to childhood, and I didn't have some of the best experiences.
And so with not necessarily having, the role models that in terms of were positive, and the experiences, which, I myself, and I'm sure many other fathers could say that, they've had the same experience. What are the things that were able to overcome? And, take my hat off to you for, investing in your family, your marriage, and in terms of educating yourself with reading books about parenting. And, that's probably the most worthy investment any man can make. So what are the things that you've been able to, overcome as a child? And then how did you overcome them to be able to be in the place that you are now?
Well, I'll talk about what I've had to overcome as an adult, which were the habits that stemmed from these hurts and these traumas. So first, there are the hurts and the traumas, and then there are hangups. There are these stories that have cycled around in my brain. And because I was living by those stories, those resulted in destructive habits like alcoholism, addiction to pornography, addiction to lust and money, and just all these things in the most negative sense. And as an adult, all these addictions and habits almost ended my life when I hit my rock bottom. I had a 6-figure lawsuit. I came clean to my wife about going to strip clubs and engaging in all kinds of infidelity things. I was drinking myself just in a dumb stupor every single day. And I had racked up a ton of consumer debt. And all these problems culminated into this moment of surrender. Like, I can't do this anymore. I just fell to my face. And I described that as a rock bottom, where I fell flat on my back and I looked up toward God. What were some of the hurts in the beginning? What got me to that place, Pat? I'll just describe a little bit about my circumstances coming into the world. Before I was born, everyone in my family had unanimously agreed that I should be aborted. No one thought my parents were suitable and ready for a child. But my dad and my mom decided that they wanted me and decided to give it a shot. So that was really interesting. Now, before I was born, my great grandmother, she's a Holocaust survivor from Italy. She bribed my mom, who's a Catholic, to agree to convert me to Judaism at birth. She offered her $10,000, a free apartment indefinitely in a building that she owned, and ongoing, she'd pay for the wedding and then ongoing child support. So actually, my religion, once I was born, was a bribe. It was paid for.
Yeah.
And so my dad, in an act of rebellion, named me Christopher, which means bearer of Christ, because he wanted to get back at his grandma for bribing my mom to make me Jewish. So my circumstances entering the world is everybody wanted me dead. And then they were paying to manipulate me from the very beginning before I was even born.
Yeah.
So fast forward 3 years old. This is actually my first memory as a kid. Is my dad was shooting a BB gun that looked like an assault rifle out of the window of our apartment, and the neighbors, and he was shooting people, cans, cars, whatever, and I remember him just laughing and just thinking it was the funniest thing ever. And then the police banged on our door and dragged him out in handcuffs to the front of the building and dragged him into the police cruiser. And I was there 3 years old saying, "Don't take my daddy. Don't take my daddy."
Shit.
And,
Wow.
And then one night, he was high on meth and working on his car. It was like this old beat up Camaro that he spray painted black. And he needed more money for drugs. So he got a chainsaw. It was like 3 a.m. and he started chainsawing parts off the car because he was going to go sell them. And then once again, neighbors called the cops, and, crazy methed out white guy fucking chainsawing parts off of his car. We're going to arrest you, right? Because that's not normal behavior. And so this was just kind of some of those early experiences that, and then when I was 7, my mom tried to commit suicide. She drove her car off a cliff, and at 9, my dad went to prison for a long time. This time for violent crimes, and then once my dad was out of the picture, they gotten divorced. We lived kind of mostly in and out of, it was my dad's former meth dealer, now my mom's boyfriend's house. His name was Dave. And that's where I got exposed to a lot of crazy stuff in that house. And so I didn't really have any early models of safety or fatherhood. I'm just describing this totally chaotic environment to you where, fights in prison and jail time and escorts and strippers and guns and drugs were just a normal part of life as a very young child.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's that would have created a lot of uncertainty in your life, and in terms of like, I couldn't imagine seeing your dad at the age of 3 getting taken away. That would have been horrible for a young child.
I recently talked to my mom about this, and I had this memory, and I called her. I'm like, did this actually happen? I'm like, was this a movie? Was this an actual memory?
Yeah.
And she's like, yeah, it was an actual memory. And afterward, you were really sweet about it. You kept going up to people and giving them hugs and trying to comfort them. And I'm like, what? She's like, yeah, you were just a really sweet kid, even in those kinds of circumstances.
Wow. And so, after being in, by the age of 9, 10, you've already experienced so much. In terms of, as you're saying, you've played out some of those, stories, and in terms of those, the things that the acts and so forth, to be able to, as a coping mechanism. And what were, you mentioned you're already married. Did you already have your child by that stage, or did your son come after all these realizations and the work that you did?
Right before rock bottom, we were pregnant with who I thought was going to be my first son.
Right.
And I had this moment where I came home one day and my hand was shaking going into the door of our apartment. And I told her everything over the course of the next few days and weeks. And the truth just flowed out of me in waves. I had just hit this point where I just surrendered, right? And she says, all right, we're going to get on our face and we're going to pray, and we're going to pray to God. And I was like, what do you mean we're going to pray to God? Like, I didn't totally understand what she was talking about. And then I found myself at an all weekend workshop called Every Man's Battle. And I was familiar with the all weekend workshops. I had done Unleash the Power Within. I felt like I could just like forcibly get myself out of this situation. But it was in that workshop that I actually started to admit some of my shame and like some of my guilt over time with other guys around me that were also working on themselves. And once I kind of started to step out of that isolation, I realized I wasn't alone.
Yeah.
And that really started to light things up for me, is to realize that I was not alone in these things that had happened to me, is that, these are all very human problems. I'm not the first man on the planet that has daddy issues.
Yeah.
There are many men, resilient dads out there that have had some fucked up situations. Absolutely. And have overcome them and are great dads today. I can choose right now to go be a horrible father and repeat all of these patterns from my past. Or I can choose the harder road, which is to work on them and go through the pain, but be who I never got to. And so I actually have a tremendous amount of gratitude for my parents, because they were so extreme in everything they did, that it's forcing me to be incredibly extreme in my recovery and my personal development. And as a result, it's helping me serve a lot of people right now in my work. And so I have a lot of gratitude, but for the longest time, I was just so angry at both of them. But I've forgiven them fully. Like, I don't have good relationships with them, but I've forgiven them in the sense that like that stuff doesn't hold me back anymore.
That, in terms of your wife, sounds like an amazing woman to have to, it's pretty much, a sign of unconditional love. Like, no person would want to, feel those, or know that in terms of their partner's done some things that in terms of aren't integrous with, their marriage or their relationship. And, she's been able to see that you're a human being and she loves you for who you are. And that's beautiful. And that's something that I'm even trying to work on myself, because similar to yourself, like, I had a lot of resentment and anger as a child. My parents separated by the time I was 5 or 6. Went overseas with my mum and my younger brother, who just had an accident. and became, had cerebral palsy through an accident at the hospital where he was left without any oxygen for 20 minutes. My dad, I only found out literally 2 weeks ago after speaking with my mum. So after escaping from Vietnam at the age of 16, him and his brother on a boat, he spent 18 months in a refugee camp in Indonesia. And, some of the, mum didn't tell me all the experiences, but, some of the experiences that I've heard from other people being in refugee camps and possibly, the early 80s, the conditions weren't as good as possibly they are today, because there's a lot more awareness. But he struggled with alcohol. That's how he actually, passed away due to his liver giving up. And so the combination of his own childhood, some trauma through his own experiences for freedom and escaping, to having a son, added. So my brother was only 2 and his name was Christopher. It's that name always has a deep meaning towards me. And my first son's name is Christopher as well. So I named him after my brother.
Wow.
Yeah. And so his way of dealing it was with alcohol. And he wasn't able to see past that. And, maybe because the internet wasn't around back then, and we have the ability to so much information, and like even podcasting, that wasn't probably, that definitely wasn't around. So being vulnerable and as open as you have been, I really appreciate that. It gives
Can
me.
I show you what it's taken, like physically, like show you?
Please do share.
This is what it looked like. This first blue chip in my recovery groups represents like surrender. The journey begins. And it took me a couple times to have to start over. Then each one of these red ones is for 30 days. And then the green one is for 60 days. And then the white one is for 90 days. And then all the way to what I proudly have right now, which is, 3 years of sobriety.
Wow.
And
congratulations.
It hasn't been like, boom, 3 years. It's been every single day, 365 days a year, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, times 3. And I wake up tomorrow and I still have to choose this life.
So it's not something
I could go back to my old ways.
Yeah.
Probably in 24 hours, I could ruin my whole life. I could be done. I could ruin my whole fucking life and it could be over. But I have to choose every day that I wake up that today is a new life, a new mercy, a new opportunity.
Having that conscious awareness that it's, it doesn't mean that the work stops. That's a great piece and awareness that, that in terms of it's every day you wake up, you put your 2 feet on the ground, and that's your choice. Do you continue?
What happens if I stop the work? What happens if you stop the work, Pat? Is that triad comes into place. If we stop working our bodies, we're going to start to suffocate. We're going to start to put our bodies back into horrible physical health. And that's going to impact our thoughts. Our thoughts left to their own devices, our mind left to its own devices starts to go negative. We're going to tell ourselves that we're a non-resilient piece of shit and all these lies that we tell ourselves. And then we're going to start using negative language. And then all of a sudden we get right back where we started and we find ourselves in that depressed state and we've got to take that medication. We go back on this hamster wheel, or we can choose every single day to start the work over again. So we never have to go back to where we were.
That's beautifully said, Chris. Knowing that every day in terms of it's a choice. And one of I asked someone that's been in the Tony world for over 20 years, and I said, if you could sum up the whole 20 years, what would you say that you've got out of it? And he said, your emotions become your thoughts become your words, and your words become your action. So it all starts with our mind and making that conscious awareness and that decision that in terms of today is going to, I'm grateful for another day given to me, and I'm going to make the most of it and be grateful for the opportunity to be on this world again today. Really, really appreciate your vulnerability and opening up and sharing your story and the journey that you've already started, and I congratulate you and send my love and encouragement to many more years of success on your journey to your peaceful and beautiful state. Thanks very much, Chris. I hope everyone got as much out of this episode as I did. And again, I'm Pat, the Resilient Dad, and hope you guys have an amazing day.
Hey guys, I really appreciate you listening to today's show. It means a lot to me that you're part of the journey and mission to help single fathers be the best dads possible. I'd really appreciate it if you review the show and share it with someone you genuinely believe could benefit from the content. Please visit resilientdad.com for more content and resources as we build this community for dads everywhere.